All right. Well, thank you, Daniel, for defining shamanic astrology and its principles and foundation material. What we're going to do is we'd like to know more about the difference between other forms of astrology and shamanic astrology, and how to use that as a practical difference between the two.
Thank you. Yeah, in the previous section, admittedly, that was philosophical and broad sweeps of understanding. But on a more practical level, there are some very basic differences. For example, in the very beginning of us working with this, we threw out something that's a feature of virtually every form of astrology, which are the judgments, the hierarchies. So we're not looking at it like a certain sign is good or bad, a certain placement on the chart is good or bad. Any form of judgment, even if they're subtle, words like exaltation, detriment, even rulership. And we're even trying to redefine the language so the word opposition is not used as much as resonant polarity, because it makes it sound like they're against each other, and they're really not.
Even hard aspects. There's the aspects in astrology that are referred to, the squares, oppositions, and conjunctions, are considered hard, which implies difficult. And so we've relanguaged that to say that they are dynamic aspects, because that's when things really happen, and when we have the opportunity to go through change and have some sort of learning process that takes place as a result of that. So it's not a judgment that it's difficult, although it may be difficult, but to create a dynamic experience.
So that's the first thing, which is somewhat surprising to people when they get into this form of astrology, that we really have eliminated that, because I think it's only done damage, and that also any judgment of a configuration, being good or bad or better or worse. I guess you could say our view of the chart is that everyone has the absolute perfect set of conditions for the unfoldment of their soul. So we've thrown out so-called Christianized karma. That if you're going through something difficult, that it's because it's a punishment for having screwed up in the past. Or if you have a really enjoyable experience, well, it must be a reward for having been good. That does not fit into our world view here. But an even more general and practical thing to know about this kind of astrology is that it's not sun sign based. Most people in the culture, when you think of astrology, they're thinking, well, I'm a Libra or I'm an Aries, which is based on the fact that their sun happened to be in that month. So they were born in that month, fine. But to be able to attribute to everyone born in a particular month certain characteristics makes no sense. Actually, it turns out that sun sign astrology is really recent. Many of the other forms of astrology that I've been sourcing, like Hellenistic and India and so on, they have never emphasized the sun sign, more so the moon, rising sign, other features of the chart. So that's really, before you even get into the second lesson, it's really important to get that. This is not sun sign based. Yeah.
And I understand that there's 3 different zodiacs that is used in this paradigm. Is that correct?
Yes. So we do use the seasonal Hellenistic sign-based zodiac, but we use it in combination with sidereal zodiacs that split up the night sky into 12 portions of stars. But we also take into account the constellational groups themselves. Putting all of those 3 together, you can come up with a far better view of how the signs, the archetypes, the stories, and the mythologies will change over time. So we're not either sidereal, we're not tropical, we kind of blend as many features as possible into this.
It is. I think that's a really important piece because so many times I've talked to people who are sidereal astrologers, and they say that the tropical astrologers don't know what they're talking about. They don't get that they're wrong, and they don't want to consider that they're maybe using a completely different system. And the tropical astrologers don't understand that what system they're using and how it's different from the sidereal
Right.
astrologers. And so we're really here to not only understand that, help people understand those two, but to see how do we bring them together, because it's not either or, it's really both of them and more. So yeah,
Now, this is not going to be a feature of the teachings in class number 1. There's later courses in cosmology where if you become a shamanic astrologer, you'll really know how to understand this really thoroughly, to be able to know the difference between the different zodiacs. That isn't required for class number 1, but we wanted to let you know the foundations about how we got there.
And
right?
you can then have an intelligent conversation with somebody who may be saying, no, my system is right and your system is wrong. And so it's really good that we can train as many people to know that difference and start bringing the systems together rather than having the split that currently exists.
And how does it relate to astrological houses?
There's so many different house systems you can choose to use. I was trained in many of them years ago in the 70s and 80s. But since actually 1999, we've converted everything over to the earliest of all the house systems because it seems to work best within this paradigm, and it's called the whole sign house system. So right off the top, we'll let you know that. That's where we're getting the meanings and the way we develop the storylines that you're going to be learning about thoroughly from here on after class 1.
And it really fits into the basic principles of shamanic astrology to use the systems that are the most simple and elegant and where we can get the information quickly and easily, rather than all these complications that other house systems can create, like intercepted houses and crazy.
And how it changes based on if you're in the North Pole or if you're at 60 degrees north latitude, the chart is so skewed. So things like that are eliminated with this. So these are some of the technical differences between this form of astrology and the more mainstream varieties.
And it seems like there's shamanic astrology places an emphasis on compassion and having compassion.
Well, it kind of follows logically from not having the hierarchical judgments and good or bad, right or wrong, or like certain signs are better than others, or people feeling embarrassed that they happen to be one rather than another. And our view, and it's actually personally why I got into astrology in the first place, was to have a framework from which to have compassion for all sorts of people. And then hopefully, if we have compassion for many, many, many different kinds of individuals on the planet, they'd have compassion for me. So there's really that motive in there also, that if you can understand that where many, many different types of people are coming from, then it gives you a phenomenal, compassionate foundation for valuing all different kinds of human beings.
Making space for everyone, and there's a Native American term of your place on the wheel of life or in the circle of life. And that if we have any one place missing, we really don't have all the possibilities available to us. So we're making space for all the possibilities and all the different ways of being human.
There's another thing I'm just thinking about in this segment that will be a great relief to the students, which is that after having spent many years in other forms of astrology, which often requires a great deal of technical knowledge, a lot of mathematics, as well as layers and layers of complexity. What we've tried to do in shamanic astrology is to really simplify it, but not simplify it meaning making it superficial. Trying to take the least number of features that would be necessary to get to the deepest issues regarding our soul's journey. So this is more archetypal, and it's more like taking the most important features and not wasting time on the other extrapolations that are out there, which there's so much. I mean, if you look at an astrology section of a bookstore or a library, I mean, where do you start? Well, this is, I think, a good place to start.
And as somebody who
And finish.
Yeah, as somebody who later went and studied other kinds of astrology just so I could know what they were after mastering shamanic astrology, I was amazed at how complicated they made everything.
Yes.
And using so many different things that aren't really necessary. And I would look at the chart and get the exact same information using the simpler techniques or the
Right.
less complicated techniques of shamanic astrology as they were getting with these really complicated, convoluted ways of coming up with information. So it gave me such a much even deeper appreciation for the power of this system and how much easier it is to learn than having to learn all these complicated
And
ways.
one of the most important features being, after all these years of doing it, being able to assess like levels of importance, and to be able to know what are the highest tiers of importance in looking at a chart, and not wasting time on all the minutiae.
Right. Yeah. I love that. It's really great.
Thank you.